The phrase oppressed Russian minority has over the past few years become a synonym for fabricated casus belli that the Russian government uses to invade other nations. This can be seen in the examples of Georgia in 2008, where Putin's regime claimed that the unrecognized states of Abkhazia and South Ossetia, both located in regions mostly made up of Russians, were being oppressed. This was followed by an invasion and occupation of Georgia, and created severe instability in the Caucasus region. And probably more fresh in everybody's mind is the internationally condemned 2014 invasion, occupation, and annexation of Crimea and eastern Ukrainian regions of Lugansk and Donetsk. What's often overlooked, though, is actual cases of oppression and discrimination against Russian minorities in northeastern Europe. My name is Jesse Kireev, and today we will be looking at the situations post-Soviet Russians find themselves in after having chosen to stay in the Baltic states, particularly in Estonia. To really understand this conflict, you have to know some of the history behind the Russian and Soviet occupations of Estonia throughout the 20th century. Let me set the scene. The year was 1918, and the Bolshevik overthrow of the Russian Tsar had recently taken place. The former Russian Empire, of which Estonia was officially a part of, was in complete chaos, and the occupying German military had just lost the First World War. A group of Estonian nationalists representing Estonia in the Russian government decided that now was their chance to declare an independent Estonian state, and so on the 24th of February, 1918, they did. Unfortunately, the newly formed Soviet government didn't like that. The Soviets proceeded to invade Estonia, and a bloody war fell over the country. 2 years passed, and a body count of at least 4,000 people piled up. But the Estonians won, and in 1920 signed a pact with the Soviet Union wherein the Soviets relinquished all claims to Estonian territory. And so for about 20-odd years, the Estonians enjoyed some independence. But then World War II came around, and the Estonians found themselves sandwiched right in the middle, between a genocidal Germany and an ever-powerful Stalinist Soviet Union. The Estonian government gave in to Soviet pressure and was annexed by the Union in 1940. And there it remained for over 50 years. An entire generation having been born and lived most of their lives without ever having known anything other than Soviet occupation. The Stalinist policy of Russification was felt heavily in Estonia, possibly even more so than in many other places in Eastern Europe. At the end of the Second World War, ethnic Estonians made up about 94% of the country's population. By the end of the Cold War, that number had fallen to just under 62%. Estonians were subject to forced removal to Siberia, imprisonment in gulags, land theft, and cultural erasure. Russian replaced Estonians in many schools, and Estonia lost much of its sense of independence and pride throughout the next half-century. But in 1991, as the Soviet government ruptured and fragmented in the midst of perestroika and glasnost, the Estonian government seized the moment and declared independence once again. What followed was a set of policies passed by the Estonians that is seen by some as reparations, but seen by many others as the beginning of a long trend of oppression of Russian minorities. Particularly at stake here was land rights and citizenship. The Estonian government, shortly after independence, began to reappropriate some of the property and land owned by Russians, and redistribute it to Estonians. While much of this land was originally owned by Estonians, many Russians found themselves losing houses and farms that their family had owned for decades. Andrei Zarenkov, a representative of the Russian community, said in an interview with NPR,
"They had the land, they had the money, they were reborn in very good conditions. Russians had nothing. It wasn't fair. Russians were living in this country and became strangers."
What else comes into play is the fact that post-independence, the Estonian state refused to give citizenship to its Russian residents. For a Russian to receive citizenship, they had to have a fluent understanding of Estonian. But many Russians, having for decades and centuries lived in tight-knit communities within Estonia, found themselves unable to pass the language tests. Many of those that could pass the tests simply refused to, due to hostility they experienced from Estonians, and a refusal thereof to be branded as belonging to a group that hated them. And so as the Union fell apart, and Russia became a separate country, they found themselves having no citizenship at all. The Estonian government gave them what are called grey passports, basically serving as a driver's license might here. These grey passports, while allowing ethnic Russians to reside in Estonia, gave them a lot of problems too, such as finding a job or traveling to other places in Europe in search of work. Vladimir Petrov, speaking to Slate magazine, said, quote, "Traveling within the EU is not too much of a problem, but working there is a whole other matter. You cannot stay for more than a few months anywhere, so effectively we must be in Estonia. I need a visa to go anywhere, even the countries which welcome almost any tourist. It makes you feel like there is something wrong with you, or that you're some sort of criminal or Russian spy." End quote. This isn't helped by the fact that Estonia is actively tightening its language laws. Russian schools and Russian neighborhoods now have to comply to having at least 60% of their classes in Estonian. Russian teachers in these schools who don't speak Estonian well enough quickly find themselves without a job, and Estonian inspectors travel between these schools to verify that they follow these procedures. Estonia has been making some progress in its relationship with Russians in recent months. The Prime Minister announced early last year that he will be learning Russian, and Estonia has taken some steps to loosen its citizenship requirements for its Russian residents. But tensions still remain high, and many Russians still remain wary of accepting or being accepted into a country and society that they feel is hostile and cold to them. This has been Jesse Curea for the Cycle News Hour. If you're interested in more stories like this, feel free to visit www.thecyclenewshour.com or check us out on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or any of your favorite podcast streaming services.